Stefan Borson is in studio with Alex and myself tonight, financial fair play expert, former advisor to Manchester City. Having said all that, Stefan, had Chelsea managed to get Conor Gallagher out of there and over to Tottenham, it would have helped them from a financial viewpoint, would it not?
Yeah, look, we all know the pure profits that you get from selling your youngsters off that have no book value. So fine, but clearly to sell off your captain and near ever-present player to your local rivals was a slightly unusual situation. So I think when we looked at that at the start of the window, we were thinking, what's going on there? Look, it's not a big surprise that of all the people that didn't bite at 50 to 80 million pounds, that Daniel Levy sort of paused and said, "I'll wait and see what happens." Thanks, because he knows. I'm quite sure that within the Premier League, but within particularly teams like Spurs, they understand Chelsea's predicament when it comes to PSR, financial fair play, for this season, and they will take advantage of that. And that's what you've seen with Broja. They talked about, again, 50 to 60 million quid at the start of the window, or even a couple of weeks ago. And he ends up going for potentially zero, actually. The loan fee might be zero.
If he plays every game.
If he plays every game.
Yeah. So are clubs, Stefan, studying other clubs' accounts and then making their minds up as to how they'll behave, what kind of activity they will have?
Well, it's about leverage in the negotiation. And at the end of the day, if you're looking at buying a player, I mean, this is, arguably with Arsenal and United in the last window, arguably they let Chelsea off the hook by taking Havertz for 67, which I think was somewhere in the region of a 35 million quid book profit, and by taking Mason Mount for 55. Again, 55 million quid profit. Those two profits made a massive difference to Chelsea's ability to hit financial fair play for last year.
Yeah, but having said that, Chelsea have spent, since Bowley and Igbali came in, Chelsea have spent something in the region of £1 billion. So how have they managed to get around FFP? That's what everybody's asking.
Yeah, well, look, they've used
Is there trouble on the horizon?
Tricks of amortisation. In my mind, there's certainly trouble on the horizon, and they will certainly fail financial fair play for the current season, unless, it seems to me very unlikely, that by the 30th of June this year, they sell well over £100 million of players. But the window that they can now do that, now that the window is about to slam shut,
is close quietly anyway.
Close quietly this year.
Yes.
It's going to be very small because the season's going to finish and we've got the Euros. So if you look at someone like Gallagher's going to be in the Euros from the 14th of June. So if they want to ship Gallagher before the 30th of June, they've got to move very, very quickly. And again, the likely buyers are going to know that Chelsea need to sell players.
They've shown their hand, haven't they?
Well, I think
in that
so.
respect. And is it mischievous of me to suggest this window once again proves that Todd Bowley and the Chelsea staff working under him really don't know what they're doing, because they've been bad buyers in the last three transfer windows. They've effectively bidded against themselves for the likes of Fernandes, who we talked about. For me, they paid too much money for Moises Caicedo. And now they've been bad sellers as well. I mean, I know you mentioned what they did in the summer, but in terms of Conor Gallagher, they set the benchmark so high, nobody was going to bite at that. This is a player who will only have a year left on his contract, so they're not really in the strongest position there. And when you look at Broja, how do you go from asking for £50 million a week ago to literally giving him away in the final hours of the transfer window? I'd be very concerned if I was a Chelsea fan. I'd be very concerned if I was Mauricio Pochettino. Do these guys who are paying my wages, do they actually know how to run a football club?
Yeah, look, they must do. And at the end of the day, they're very smart guys. They must know what they're doing, right? I think if you look at the quality of people in that club at all levels, they must have a plan. I think one thing that might have changed the calculus, though, is the Everton situation. If you work on the basis that you can breach financial fair play and pay a financial penalty, it's a cost of doing business. When it's a very big point sanction, it's a different ballgame, because you can't tell what that 10 or 20 points is going to do.
Yes, yeah.
And by the way, this breach that Chelsea are lined up for is much bigger than Everton's breach. And most importantly, from an aggravating perspective, they will consider it deliberate. It won't be. They can't hide behind having built a stadium or inadvertently breach financial fair play. So if they breach, when it comes to the assessment of the sanction, and remember the way this works.
If they breach, or when now
well,
that
I
they've
think
breached.
they'll breach, but the period, the accounting period, is not over yet. I mean, let's be fair to Chelsea. And I have lots of people telling me, well, you just sell Conor Gallagher for 60 million, you sell Brozier for 40, you sell James for 30, or whoever it is. People come up with this list of players that they can just sell. But there's no buyers. There's no money in the game at the moment outside of the Premier League, and the Premier League are not stupid. They're not going to bite on these crazy prices for players that they don't rate that highly, where they know that Chelsea are over barrel.
So are we certainly looking further down the line? We haven't got it in for Chelsea, incidentally. I don't think that we have. But we have to talk about it because this is where we're at. When it comes along and the penalty becomes apparent, what kind of penalty are we talking about?
Well, look, let's say I'm totally wrong about Everton and it's overturned and it becomes a financial penalty, then okay. Bowley,
is that open season then?
Well, it will be open season, yeah. And Chelsea will have been vindicated to some extent. They'll pay their financial penalty and it'll all be fine. And Bowley will add that to the $2.5 billion that he spent on the club. But if Everton is not overturned and there is a a points penalty because they've had a sporting advantage, which they clearly have had a sporting advantage. When you buy players of that scale, you've had a sporting advantage, and sporting advantage is not about how they perform on the field. It doesn't depend whether those players work. If you signed £300 million players, there is an assumption that you've had a sporting advantage. So with a breach as big as it looks like Chelsea are going to have, and I say that because they're in a season where they're not in Europe at all, and so we know roughly what their revenue is going to be. We know what their wage bill roughly is going to be. It didn't drop, so everybody was saying that the wage bill was going to drop for 22-23, but we now know from the Deloitte Money League that actually the wage bill went up. So Deloitte's had the wage bill at £404 million for last season. Now, 45 of that looks like it is the money that went out to Tuchel and to Graham Potter.
Yep.
So, and to Brighton, because Brighton got 21 million quid.
Yeah.
So we think the wage bill was probably 360 on revenue of about 500. But when you've got a wage bill of 360 on revenue of 500, you've not got a lot of leeway there. You've got operating expenses for the business, which takes it down to effectively zero in terms of the operating position. And then on top of that, you've got something like £180 million of amortisation for last year, which comes off. So their losses last year were something like £200 million for an FFP, from an FFP perspective, before you start adding stuff back. So
they should be bracing themselves, is what you're saying.
It's very hard to see any other way in which the numbers look. They're not even close when you look at the numbers.
Okay.
They've still got two big earners to come back as well at the end of the season, by the way. Romelu Lukaku, only on loan.
Yeah.
Kepa Arrizabalaga, only on loan.